The girl of the golden fields, the sun, a benevolent eye in the boundless sky, poured liquid gold over the sprawling wheat fields that embraced the village of Oakhaven. Young Elara, no more than 8 summers old, ran through the swaying stalks, her laughter a bright, melodious counterpoint to the rustling breeze. The wheat, taller than she was, tickled her arms and brushed against her sun-kissed cheeks, leaving behind a faint, earthy scent that clung to her like a second skin. This was her kingdom, these golden fields, and she, their undisputed queen. Farmer McGregor, a man whose hands were as gnarled and sturdy as the oak trees bordering his land, watched her from the edge of the field, a soft smile creasing his weathered face. He leaned on his hoe, a tool that had been an extension of his arm for decades, and adjusted the brim of his straw hat. Elara was a peculiar child, even by Oakhaven's gentle standards. While other children her age succumbed to the usual coughs and sniffles that swept through the village with the changing seasons, Elara remained untouched. A perpetual glow of health seemed to emanate from her, a vibrant energy that defied the fleeting vulnerabilities of childhood. He remembered the winter before, a harsh one that had brought a particularly nasty bout of the winter chill. Young Thomas, barely 5, had been bedridden for weeks, his small body racked with fever. Even McGregor's own granddaughter, Lily, a sturdy girl known for her robust constitution, had been laid low. But Elara? She had spent those icy days out in the biting wind, helping her mother gather kindling, her cheeks rosy with health, her eyes bright with an unyielding vitality. It was as if the very essence of the earth, the resilient spirit of the growing things, pulsed through her veins, shielding her from every encroaching ailment. He had once mentioned it to Elara's mother, a quiet woman with eyes that held a depth of understanding McGregor often found unsettling. "You're Elara," he'd grumbled, half in awe, half in disbelief. "She's made of stronger stuff than the rest of us, I reckon. Never a sniffle, never a cough. It's unnatural, almost." Elara's mother had simply smiled, a knowing, serene expression that offered no explanation, only a quiet affirmation. Today, Elara was chasing butterflies, her slim figure weaving through the golden expanse with an agile grace. She moved with an innate understanding of the land, her bare feet seemingly drawing strength from the rich soil beneath. A stray bumblebee, heavy with pollen, buzzed past her ear, and she giggled, extending a gentle finger for it to briefly perch on. It was a small moment, easily overlooked, but for McGregor, it reinforced the notion that Elara possessed a unique connection to the natural world, a kinship that transcended mere childhood play. Later, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elara joined McGregor at the edge of the field. She wasn't out of breath, not even after hours of running. "Farmer McGregor," she said, her voice clear and melodious, "the wheat smells happy today." He chuckled, a rumbling sound from deep within his chest. Happy, is it now, Ilara? And how can we be happy? Because it's growing, she replied, her eyes, the color of warm honey, sparkling with earnestness. And it knows it's going to feed everyone. That makes things happy, doesn't it? To be useful. McGregor paused, considering her words. Most children would have spoken of playing, of chasing, of the simple joy of the moment. But Ilara, even at this tender age, saw the deeper purpose, the interconnectedness of things. It was this innate sense of contribution, this quiet understanding of service that set her apart. Ilara, he finally said, his voice softer than usual. It does. A faint breeze stirred, carrying with it not just the scent of ripe wheat, but something else, something subtle and unsettling. It was a scent McGregor recognized, though he couldn't quite place it. A hint of distant smoke, perhaps, or damp earth from a far-off storm. He frowned, his gaze drifting towards the distant hills that cradled the neighboring villages. "Farmer McGregor?" Ilara asked, her tone shifting, a hint of concern entering her voice. "Why are people talking about the red cough in Willow Creek?" McGregor's jaw tightened. The red cough, a new, insidious ailment that had begun to creep into conversations carried by traveling merchants and hushed whispers from distant hamlets. It was a name that struck a chord of unease, a stark contrast to the idyllic peace of Oak Haven. "It's nothing for you to worry about, Ilara," he said, trying to infuse his voice with more conviction than he felt. "Just a bad cold, that's all. Willow Creek has always been a bit damp, prone to such things." But Ilara wasn't so easily dismissed. Her empathy, an almost tangible force, picked up on the subtle tremor in his voice, the flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "But Thomas's mother said it's not like other colds. She said people cough up red and then they just stop." The directness of her question, the innocent gravity with which she spoke, caught McGregor off guard. He cleared his throat, suddenly feeling the weight of the setting sun on his shoulders. He didn't want to burden her with such dark tidings. Not in her golden kingdom. "It's called Boren syndrome, child," he admitted, his voice low. "A new sickness. Came from the coastal towns, they say, spreading inland. But Oak Haven is far from the sea. We'll be fine." He tried to reassure her, but the words felt hollow, even to his own ears. The whispers had grown louder in recent weeks. Merchants passing through Oak Haven, their faces grim, spoke of entire families falling ill in the villages to the west. They spoke of a cough that racked the body, a fever that burned like an internal fire, and a chilling lethargy that inevitably led to stillness. It was a disease that seemed to extinguish life with a terrifying swiftness, leaving behind a trail of grief and fear. Ilara looked out over the fields, her gaze no longer fixed on the carefree dance of butterflies, but on something unseen, something distant and ominous. A shadow seemed to pass over her bright eyes, a fleeting moment of understanding that was too profound for her years. She understood not through factual knowledge, but through that innate empathy that something terrible was approaching, something that threatened the very happiness she believed the wheat fields promised. But what if it isn't just a cold? Farmer McGregor, she asked, her voice barely a whisper, yet carrying a resonance that made the old farmer shiver despite the lingering warmth of the day. What if it's something that can't be stopped with warm blankets and honey tea? McGregor looked at her, truly looked at her. Her small frame, usually so vibrant and energetic, seemed to hold a quiet gravity. He saw not just a child, but a nascent awareness, a budding understanding of the world's harsh realities. He saw the kindness in her eyes, but also a nascent strength, a resilience that hinted at something deeper than mere physical immunity. He knelt beside her, his rough hand gently resting on her shoulder. "We always find a way, Elara," he said, his voice gruff, but filled with a genuine attempt at reassurance. "People always find a way to help each other. We always have. And we always will." He hoped his words were true, hoped that the resilience he spoke of, the collective strength of Oakhaven, would be enough to withstand whatever darkness Boren's syndrome brought. But as he looked at Elara, bathed in the last golden light of the setting sun, he couldn't shake the feeling that this time the challenge might be unlike anything they had faced before. And perhaps, just perhaps, the solution might lie not in the strength of the many, but in the unique, unyielding spirit of one small girl, a girl who smelled the happiness of growing wheat and instinctively understood the true meaning of selfless purpose. The golden fields, usually a symbol of bounty and peace, now seemed to hold a silent, watchful breath, as if awaiting a future that would demand more than just a good harvest. The shadow of Boren's syndrome, the whispers from distant villages, had been mere echoes, carried on the wind like forgotten dreams. Now they solidified into a chilling reality. The first coughs in Oakhaven were dismissed as winter chills, but soon the dry, hacking sound became ubiquitous, a rhythmic pulse of sickness permeating every home. Children, usually a vibrant tapestry of laughter and play, grew lethargic, their eyes dull, their skin flushed with a fever that defied the usual remedies. The red cough, as it was now definitively called, had arrived. Farmer McGregor, his brow perpetually furrowed with concern, watched his own fields with a new kind of anxiety. His youngest, little Finn, had been seized by the fever 3 days prior. Despite his wife's best efforts, herbal teas, cool compresses, Finn's breathing grew shallower, each exhalation a painful wheeze. McGregor felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, heavier than any winter frost. He'd seen the blight take his crops, but this was taking his children. He remembered Elara, vibrant and untroubled, pulling weeds from his garden just weeks ago, her skin glowing with an inner warmth. He wondered if her immunity was merely a child's fleeting robustness, or something more profound, something that might even now protect her from the insidious grip of the red cough. Elara, however, was not concerned with her own well-being. The suffering of her neighbors echoed within her, a discordant symphony of pain she couldn't ignore. While other children were confined to their beds, her small frame moved with tireless purpose through the streets of Oakhaven. She carried buckets of fresh water, fetched clean linens, and brewed the calming chamomile tea her grandmother had taught her to prepare. Her steps were light, her movements efficient, as if she were a tiny, unwavering beacon in the encroaching darkness. She spent hours at the Miller's house, where all three children were gravely ill. Mrs. Miller, exhausted and despairing, merely wept as Elara gently sponged the fevered brow of the youngest, a boy named Thomas, no older than herself. Elara hummed a quiet, comforting tune, a melody she'd learned from the wind rustling through ancient oaks. She spoke in soft whispers, telling Thomas stories of brave squirrels and soaring falcons, stories that momentarily pulled his glazed eyes back from the brink. The Miller children didn't miraculously recover, but under Elara's quiet care, they seemed to suffer a little less, their breathing a fraction steadier. At the blacksmith's, where Mr. Grumman lay coughing violently, Elara helped his elderly wife prepare bowls of thin broth, patiently stirring until the vegetables softened, then coaxing a few spoonfuls into the old man's mouth. She held his hand, calloused and trembling, and simply listened as he muttered about the unfairness of it all, about the years of hard work that now seemed destined to end in a breathless gasp. Elara didn't offer platitudes. She offered presence, a quiet understanding that transcended words. It was during one such visit to the home of the elderly seamstress, Mrs. Gable, that Elara encountered Dr. Anya. The doctor had arrived in Oakhaven only 2 days prior, her wagon laden with medical supplies and a grim determination. Her reputation preceded her, a woman of science, trained in the city, who had dedicated her life to understanding and combating disease. She moved with a brisk efficiency, her eyes sharp and observant, missing nothing. Dr. Anya stood over Mrs. Gable's bedside, her stethoscope pressed to the old woman's chest, her expression grave. The air was thick with the scent of sickness and desperation. Elara, sitting quietly by the window, was meticulously folding clean bandages. She had been there for hours, fetching water, adjusting pillows, her small hands moving with a practiced grace that surprised the doctor. Anya finished her examination, her lips a thin, tight line. Her lungs are severely compromised, she stated, more to herself than to the room. She turned, finally noticing the child. "And who is this?" Her voice was direct, devoid of the usual softness people adopted for children, but not unkind. Elara rose, curtsying politely. "I am Elara, doctor. I am helping Mrs. Gable." Anya's gaze swept over the child, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "You've been in this house with Mrs. Gable for how long?" "Since morning, doctor," Elara replied, her voice clear and unfaltering. "She needs help, And have you experienced any symptoms? Anya asked, her medical mind already cataloging data. A cough, a fever, dizziness. Ilara shook her head. No, doctor, I feel well. Anya's eyebrows arched slightly. She had seen the red cough decimate entire families in other villages, sparing no one, young or old. Yet here was this child, moving freely through the heart of the epidemic, untouched. She reached out, her fingers pressing gently against Ilara's forehead, then her neck. The child's skin was cool, her pulse steady and strong. There was no sign of the characteristic rash that often accompanied the early stages of Boren's syndrome. Remarkable, Anya murmured, more to herself than to Ilara. She pulled a small silver thermometer from her bag. May I? She asked, holding it out. Ilara nodded, opening her mouth obediently. While the thermometer did its work, Anya continued to observe her. The child's eyes, a vibrant green, held a depth that belied her years. There was no fear in them, only a calm resolve. She moved with an innate grace, her presence a quiet comfort in the room of suffering. The thermometer beeped. Anya withdrew it, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly as she read the digital display. A perfect, healthy temperature. She repeated the process just to be sure. The result was identical. You've been in close proximity to the infected for days now, Anya pressed, a new urgency in her tone. Yes, doctor, Ilara confirmed, a slight frown creasing her brow. Many of my friends are sick. I try to help them. Anya stared at Ilara, her analytical mind grappling with the anomaly. Her previous observations of Ilara, gleaned from Farmer McGregor's hushed comments about the child's unusual resilience, had been anecdotal. Now, faced with undeniable evidence, a scientific curiosity, bordering on awe, began to blossom within her. The red cough was relentless, sparing no one. Yet, Ilara remained untouched, a living testament to an unknown resilience. Ilara, Anya said, her voice softer now, tinged with a nascent wonder. You are a very special child. She didn't elaborate, but the words hung in the air. A profound declaration that both acknowledged Ilara's uniqueness and hinted at a greater, as yet unrevealed, purpose. For the first time since the red cough had begun its relentless march, a flicker of hope ignited within Dr. Anya, a tiny spark in the vast darkness of despair. This child moving with such selfless grace might not just be immune. She might be the answer, a shield against the sickness. The scent of antiseptic, sharp and unfamiliar, now mingled with the earthy dampness of Oakhaven. Dr. Anya, her spectacles perched precariously on her nose, motioned Ilara toward a makeshift examination table fashioned from 2 sturdy planks and a clean canvas. The usual bustle of the McGregor farm seemed muted, replaced by the hushed anxiety that clung to every breath in the village. Just a few simple observations. Ilara. Anya's voice, though calm, held an undertone of focused intensity. She held a smooth, cool stone to Ilara's forehead, then pressed her fingers gently to the pulse point on Ilara's wrist. Her touch was precise, professional, a stark contrast to the rough, comforting pats Ilara usually received. Ilara sat patiently, her gaze drifting to the window. Outside, the world seemed a blur of muted greens and grays, the vibrant hues of spring harvest now overshadowed by the pervasive pallor of sickness. She thought of the Miller children, their small, hot hands she'd held just hours ago, and Mr. Grumman's rattling cough that echoed through the quiet lanes. A knot of worry tightened in her stomach, despite the doctor's reassuring presence. Anya then produced a small silver instrument, its polished surface glinting in the dim light. This will feel like a tiny prick, a pinprick, nothing more. Ilara braced herself, feeling a fleeting, almost imperceptible sting on her finger. A single bead of crimson welled up, and Anya carefully collected it on a glass slide, holding it to the light before placing it under a small portable microscope she'd brought from the city. The next hour passed in a quiet ritual of observation. Anya checked Ilara's breathing, listened to her heart with a wooden tube pressed to her chest, and noted the clarity of her eyes. She even took a small sample of Ilara's hair, scrutinizing it with the same meticulous attention. Ilara, accustomed to the raw, unscientific methods of folk healing, found the doctor's approach both strange and compelling. There was a quiet authority in Anya's movements, a sense of purpose that hinted at something deeper than mere guesswork. Finally, Anya straightened, pushing her spectacles higher on her nose, with a weary sigh that carried a surprising weight of relief. She turned to Ilara, her usually stern expression softened by an emotion Ilara couldn't quite place. Wonder, perhaps, or a profound sense of awe. "Ilara," Anya began, her voice hushed, "what I am about to tell you is extraordinary, unprecedented." She paused, as if searching for the right words to convey the immensity of her discovery. "Your blood, your very being, possesses a remarkable resistance, a natural shield." Ilara's brow furrowed. "A shield, Doctor?" "Yes, against Boren's syndrome, against the red cough." Anya moved closer, her eyes gleaming with an almost feverish excitement. "I've observed you, Ilara, not just today, but for days now. You've been in constant contact with the sick, the Millers, Mr. Grumman, countless others. You show no symptoms, no fever, no cough, no fatigue. And now these tests, your cells, they are actively repelling the disease, neutralizing it before it can take hold." A cold shiver unrelated to any illness traced its way down Ilara's spine. She was immune to the very sickness that was ravaging her village, stealing lives, turning robust farmers into hollow shells. The realization was staggering, a sudden, dizzying drop into an unknown chasm. But how? Ilara's voice was barely a whisper, her gaze fixed on the doctor's earnest face. Anya shook her head slowly. That I do not yet know. It is beyond the scope of current medical understanding. Perhaps a genetic anomaly, a unique composition in your immune system. What matters now is the fact itself. You are immune, Ilara, and that, my dear, makes you incredibly important. Important. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Ilara had always considered herself simply a farmer's daughter, a caretaker, a helper. Her world had been defined by the cycles of planting and harvest, the simple rhythms of village life. Now, suddenly, she was something more, something different. Anya continued, her voice gaining a renewed urgency. This is not just about your survival, Ilara. This is about Oak Haven, about preventing further devastation. We need to understand why you are immune. We need to find a way to replicate it, to extract it, to create a cure, a vaccine. Ilara felt a strange blend of fear and exhilaration. Her innate empathy, her instinct to care for others, surged to the forefront. If she truly held the key, if her very existence could offer a path to healing, then she couldn't shrink from it. The thought of Mr. Grumman's labored breathing, of the Miller children's tear-streaked faces, solidified her resolve. What do I need to do, Doctor? Ilara asked, her voice steadier now, a quiet strength emerging. Anya placed a hand gently on Ilara's shoulder. For now, continue what you are doing, but with a new awareness. You are a shield, Ilara, a living, breathing shield against this sickness, and we will need to study you further, carefully, to unlock the secrets you hold. It will be a responsibility, a burden perhaps, but one that could save us all. Responsibility. The word resonated within Ilara. It wasn't a burden she sought, but it was one she felt she could not, would not shirk. Her life had been about small acts of kindness, about tending to her family and neighbors. Now, it seemed, her sphere of influence had expanded beyond anything she could have imagined. Later, as twilight bled across the fields, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and faded orange, Ilara sat by her window, the doctor's words echoing in her mind. A natural shield. Incredibly important. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened pane, the familiar face now imbued with a new, daunting significance. She thought of the ancient tales her grandmother used to tell, stories of heroes and healers, of individuals chosen by fate to guide their people through darkness. She had always dismissed them as fanciful myths, comforting bedtime stories. Now, a chilling thought pricked at her. Could she be one of them? The weight of this new reality settled upon her shoulders. It was a heavy cloak, woven with threads of hope and fear, expectation and uncertainty. She was still Ilara, the farmer's daughter, but something fundamental had shifted. Her immunity wasn't just a personal blessing. It was a potential salvation for her community, perhaps even beyond Oakhaven. A soft breeze rustled the curtains, carrying with it the faint, lingering scent of wood smoke and damp earth. But beneath it, Ilara could almost detect the insidious whisper of the sickness, a reminder of the desperate situation. She closed her eyes, picturing the faces of those she had cared for, those she still hoped to help. Her unique gift, she realized, wasn't merely a passive defense. It demanded action. It called for her to step forward, to embrace a path she had never envisioned. The journey would be fraught with challenges, she knew, but as the first stars began to prick holes in the canvas of the night sky, a quiet resolve blossomed within her. She was a shield, and she would wield it with every ounce of courage she possessed. The leader emerges the weeks following. Dr. Anya's revelation transformed Ilara from an ordinary farmer's daughter into a quiet beacon. The weight of her unique immunity settled upon her shoulders, not as a burden of fame, but as a silent responsibility. The red cough still choked the life from Oakhaven, its spectral presence clinging to the autumn air. Yet in Ilara, a different kind of strength began to bloom. It wasn't the strength of brawn, but of an unwavering spirit, a clear-headedness that seemed to cut through the pervasive despair. Her first true test arrived with a dispute over the North Field's irrigation ditch. Harvest time, already fraught with the anxieties of dwindling yields and the ever-present threat of borans, amplified every minor disagreement into a potential feud. Old Man Hemlock, his face etched with a lifetime of sun and worry, stood glaring across the muddy trench at young Finn. He diverted the flow. Hemlock's voice, raspy from years of shouting over the wind, cracked with indignation. My carrots are wilting, I tell you. Wilting. Finn, barely out of his teens, flushed a deep crimson. I only moved a few stones, Hemlock. My potatoes needed watering more urgently. They're closer to market size. The usual village elders, weary and preoccupied with their own ailing families, had offered only platitudes. But Ilara, walking past with a basket of herbs for a feverish neighbor, paused. Her presence, subtle yet undeniable, drew their attention. Her eyes, the color of moss after a spring rain, held a remarkable calm. The potatoes will rot if they thirst, Finn, Ilara said, her voice soft but carrying a surprising resonance. And Hemlock's carrots are his family's winter store. Both are vital. She knelt beside the ditch, her fingers tracing the path of the sluggish water. The main sluice is blocked further upstream by that fallen willow branch. The water isn't reaching either of your fields properly. She stood, turning to face both men. If we clear the blockage, there will be enough for both, without anyone's livelihood being jeopardized. Finn, you're strong. Hemlock, your knowledge of the riverbed is unmatched. A skeptical grumble escaped Farmer McGregor, who had been observing from a distance, leaning on his hoe. Easy enough to say, lass, but the willows are thick there. Elara met MacGregor's gaze, a hint of something unyielding in her own. Then we clear it together, tonight, after supper, not as two men fighting over scraps, but as neighbors, ensuring everyone thrives. Her words, free of judgment and filled with an intrinsic fairness, resonated. Hemlock grunted, a grudging nod. Finn, chastened, looked down, then up at Elara with a flicker of respect. By dusk, a small group, led by Elara, had indeed cleared the willow debris. The water surged clean and strong into both fields. That night, Hemlock brought Elara a small pouch of dried herbs, a rare gift. Finn, in turn, offered a bucket of newly dug potatoes, scrubbing them clean himself. A tiny knot of tension in Oak Haven had unraveled thanks to Elara's quiet intervention. The red cough continued its relentless assault, casting a long, mournful shadow over the village. Yet, even as the coughs echoed through the night, and the burial bells tolled with disheartening frequency, Elara found ways to weave threads of resilience. She moved through the village like a balm, offering assistance where it was most needed, her energy seemingly boundless. The wheat harvest, usually a communal affair of boisterous laughter and shared meals, threatened to collapse under the weight of illness and grief. Too many hands were weak, too many hearts heavy. Farmer MacGregor, overseeing his struggling fields, watched with growing despair as patches of ripe wheat lay uncut, vulnerable to the coming rains. "It's no use," he muttered to Jax, who was sharpening a scythe with a practiced, almost bored precision. "Half the harvesters are down with the cough, and the other half are too tired to lift a blade. We'll lose a quarter of the crop at least." Jax merely shrugged, his eyes dark and intelligent, scanning the horizon. "The red cough takes more than just breath, MacGregor. It takes hope." It was then Elara appeared, her basket empty, having just delivered a nourishing broth to Widow Thorne. She surveyed the golden expanse of MacGregor's field, then the weary faces of the few working. "We need more hands," she stated, her voice calm. MacGregor scoffed. "And where, lass, pray tell, are these phantom hands?" "They're here," Elara replied, her gaze sweeping across the village. "Just unorganized. We need to streamline, focus our remaining strength." She outlined her plan with a clarity that surprised even Jax. "We divide the healthy into smaller teams. One team for cutting, another for binding, a third for transport. Those too weak for heavy labor can prepare meals for the workers or care for the children, and for those who are sick, we establish a rotating watch so their families can still contribute." Jax, always quick to spot a flaw, raised an eyebrow. "And who, exactly, will be orchestrating this grand symphony of suffering?" Elara looked directly at him, her expression unwavering. "I will. We cannot afford to lose this harvest. Our survival depends on it. There was a moment of silence, broken only by the distant, hacking cough of a villager. Then, McGregor, who had initially been skeptical, slowly straightened. "It's a mad idea, lass, but a necessary one, perhaps." He looked at Ilara, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Not just respect, but a nascent trust. "All right, Ilara, tell us what to do." Over the next few days, Ilara moved with a quiet efficiency that belied her years. She assigned tasks, resolved minor squabbles with a gentle firmness, and perhaps most importantly, she led by example. She was often the first in the fields at dawn, binding sheaves with tireless energy, and the last to leave, ensuring every worker had food and comfort. She checked on the sick, offered words of encouragement, and ensured the rotating watch was maintained, allowing weary caregivers a few hours of much-needed rest. Jax, watching her, found his cynicism slowly eroding. He saw her mediate a clash over tool sharing with a simple, practical solution, then turned to comfort a grieving child with genuine empathy. He observed how her presence seemed to invigorate the weary, how her belief in their collective strength became infectious. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in the fields, he found himself volunteering for the night watch on the sick, a task he would have previously scoffed at. "You're a strange one, Ilara," he remarked, his tone devoid of its usual bite. He watched her gently wipe the brow of a feverish woman. "You make people want to do things, even things they don't want to do." Ilara offered a faint, tired smile. "They are doing them for Oakhaven, Jax, not for me." But the villagers knew better. They saw her tireless dedication, her unwavering compassion, her uncanny ability to find a path forward when all seemed lost. As the last of the wheat was safely stored, a cheer, weak but heartfelt, rose from the fields. It wasn't just a cheer for a successful harvest. It was a cheer for Ilara. Later, gathered around a small fire, the villagers spoke in hushed, reverent tones. "She knew exactly what to do," Old Man Hemlock murmured, warming his hands. "Always fair, always wise. A young mother, cradling her child, nodded. She brought order when there was only chaos, and hope when there was only despair." Farmer McGregor, usually stoic, cleared his throat. "She's got a head on her shoulders, that one, and a heart bigger than any field in Oakhaven. We'd be lost without her, truly lost." His gaze, filled with newfound admiration, found Ilara, who was quietly mending a torn sack near the edge of the firelight, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. Her presence, once merely a part of the village fabric, had become its very anchor. The red cough still stalked Oakhaven, but a new kind of immunity had begun to spread. The immunity of a community united, led by a quiet, determined spirit. Whispers of the great flood, the sky, once a canvas of cerulean and gentle clouds, had grown sullen, Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of leaden gray, punctuated by the relentless drumming of rain against thatched roofs. What started as unseasonable downpours soon escalated into a deluge that stretched the patience of even the most seasoned farmers. Whispers, carried on the damp air, spoke of distant rivers swelling beyond their banks, of bridges washed away, and fields transformed into murky lakes. Travelers arriving from the lowlands, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear, brought increasingly dire tidings. "The Everflow River," gasped a merchant, his usual booming voice reduced to a raspy croak. "It's a raging beast. Swept away half of Willow Creek last week. And the tremors. The ground itself feels alive with anger." Ilara listened, her brow furrowed with concern. The successful wheat harvest had bought Oakhaven a precious reprieve from immediate famine, but this new threat felt elemental, untamable. She watched the rain sluice down the window panes of the communal hall, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the fragile peace they had forged. Serafina, her ancient eyes holding the wisdom of generations, sat by the hearth, her gnarled hands warming around a mug of herbal tea. She had been quieter than usual these past weeks, her gaze often drifting to the stormy skies, as if reading omens in the swirling clouds. Tonight, however, her presence commanded attention. The entire village, drawn by the gravity of the weather and the latest grim reports, had gathered in the hall, the crackling fire doing little to dispel the chill of unease. "The old scrolls speak of a time such as this," Serafina began, her voice a soft, resonant hum that cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "Not since the great forgetting has the sky wept with such sorrow, nor the earth trembled with such fury." A ripple of apprehension spread through the villagers. The great forgetting was a half-remembered tale, a time of chaos and loss that had preceded the founding of Oakhaven. "What do the scrolls say, Serafina?" Ilara asked, her voice steady, though a tremor of dread ran through her. Serafina's gaze swept over the assembled faces, lingering on Ilara for a moment before addressing the room. "They speak of a cleansing, a deluge of such magnitude that it reshapes the very landscape. And in that time of overwhelming waters, they speak of an ark." A collective gasp swept through the hall. An ark? The word conjured images of impossible scale, of stories from a time so distant it felt more myth than history. "An ark?" Jack scoffed, his arms crossed, his expression a familiar mask of skepticism. "Are we talking about a big boat, Serafina? With animals, 2x2 and all that nonsense? Because, last I checked, we're miles from any navigable water, and our biggest vessel is Finn's leaky fishing punt." A few nervous chuckles broke the tension, but Jax's cynicism reflected the unspoken doubts of many a Farmer McGregor's. His face, weather-beaten and creased, shifted uncomfortably. "With all due respect, Serafina, we have enough on our plates trying to keep the crops from rotting and our homes from flooding. Tales of ancient arks, well, They don't exactly put bread on the table. Serafina held up a hand, silencing the burgeoning whispers. This ark is not merely a vessel of wood and nails, Farmer McGregor. It is a promise, a symbol of resilience. The scrolls speak of a community united in purpose, who would build a sanctuary against the coming tide, not just for themselves, but for the seed of the future. Her eyes, though ancient, gleamed with an unshakable conviction. They say, when the sky weeper cries without end, and the earth shaker groans in despair, look to the child born of immunity, for she shall guide the hands that build the ark. The air in the hall thickened, charged with a sudden, profound silence. Every eye in the room swiveled to Alara. The prophecy, once a comforting lullaby of hope for her role in the red cough cure, now twisted into something far more daunting, far more immediate. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had accepted her role as a source of healing, a beacon against the disease. But an ark, a flood of such magnitude that it required an entire community to construct a colossal sanctuary. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Jax's cynicism momentarily faltered. He looked at Alara, then back at Serafina, a flicker of something akin to fear in his sharp eyes. Hold on, you're saying this isn't just a story, Serafina? You believe this flood is coming here? The signs are clear, Jax, Serafina replied, her voice unwavering. The Everflow is but a precursor. The old scrolls describe this as the Great Flood, a time when the world itself is remade. Oak Haven, nestled high as it is, will not be immune. The waters will rise, higher than any has seen. A low murmur of fear spread through the villagers, louder this time. The red cough was a tangible enemy, one they understood even if they couldn't defeat it. But a flood of such mythical proportions, it tapped into a primal fear of the uncontrollable, the forces of nature unleashed. But how? Farmer McGregor stammered, his usual practicality dissolving into genuine alarm. How high can it rise? Our homes are built on the highest ground for leagues around. The scrolls speak of waters reaching the very peaks of the Whisperwind Mountains, Serafina stated calmly, though the implication was anything but. The Whisperwind Mountains were a distant, jagged range, towering majestically over Oak Haven, their peaks often capped with snow even in summer. The idea of water reaching them was unfathomable, terrifying. Alara felt a cold dread seep into her bones. The red cough had brought Oak Haven to its knees, but the community had fought back, inspired by hope and her leadership. This, however, was different. This was a battle against nature itself, a force that dwarfed even the deadliest disease. Yet as she looked at the fearful faces around her, she knew what she had to do. The prophecy wasn't a burden, it was a directive, a new purpose. Just as she had guided them through the epidemic, she would guide them through this. We need to understand this, Serafina, Alara said, her voice cutting through the rising panic, clear and resolute. Every detail. If the great flood is coming, We need to be ready. We need to build this ark." Her words, though spoken with quiet determination, resonated through the hall, a powerful counterpoint to the growing despair. The villagers looked at her, some with awe, others still with lingering fear, but all with a flicker of renewed hope. Ilara, the girl who had faced death and disease without flinching, was now asking them to face the wrath of the heavens, and for some inexplicable reason, they knew she would show them the way. The vision of the ark, the chilling pronouncement of the great flood hung in the sodden air, a tangible weight pressing down on Oak Haven. For days after Seraphina's prophecy, the village remained steeped in a stunned silence, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain against thatched roofs. Ilara felt the prophecy not as a distant threat, but as a burning conviction in her bones, the image of a vessel, grand and defiant against the churning waters, had taken root in her mind, eclipsing even the looming shadow of the red cough. This wasn't merely a task. It was a sacred calling, a destiny woven into the fabric of her very immunity. She stood by the rain-lashed window of her small cottage, watching the swollen river churn past, carrying debris from upstream. The current's relentless power was a stark reminder of the prophecy's urgency. How could she, a girl barely past childhood, inspire a village weary from disease and now facing an unimaginable deluge, to build something as monumental as an ark? Doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve, a cold counterpoint to the fire in her heart. Yet, the memory of Seraphina's unwavering gaze, the ancient woman's finger pointing directly at her, swept away the hesitation. The child, born of immunity. It wasn't just about surviving the red cough anymore. It was about ensuring Oak Haven had a future beyond the flood. Her first attempts to rally support met with a wall of weary skepticism. She spoke to the elders, their faces etched with lines of worry, not conviction. An ark, Ilara. With what wood? What tools? And where would we even begin? Elder Theron, usually a pillar of quiet strength, simply shook his head. "We barely have enough strength to gather firewood, child. The sickness has taken too many, and the rains, they make everything impossible." Ilara moved among the villagers, her voice clear and earnest despite the tremor of nervousness beneath. She spoke of hope, of a future, of Seraphina's ancient wisdom, but their responses were often curt, laced with a bitterness born of prolonged suffering. "Prophecy or no, Ilara, my children are hungry," one woman snapped, pulling a thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. "And my husband coughs blood. An ark won't cure that." Another man, his face gaunt, simply turned his back, retreating into the shelter of his home as if the very idea of building an ark was an unbearable burden. The weight of their despair pressed down on her, threatening to extinguish the spark within. She saw the hollow eyes, the hunched shoulders, the slow, shuffling steps. How could she ask them to undertake such a colossal endeavor when their spirits were already so broken? She knew their struggles were real, their fears valid. It wasn't a lack of will, but a profound exhaustion that held them captive. One evening, as dusk bled into a bruised purple sky, Elara found herself by the old mill, its wheel long stalled, moss-covered and silent. There, amidst a stack of neatly cut, albeit waterlogged timber, she saw Kyle. His broad back was bent over a rough plank. His hands, calloused and strong, moved with a practiced grace as he planed the surface. He was a man of few words, known for his meticulous craftsmanship and an almost supernatural ability to coax strength from the most stubborn wood. Elara hesitated, then approached. "Kyle," she began, her voice a little softer than usual. He straightened slowly, his eyes the color of damp earth, meeting hers. There was a quiet intensity about him, a stillness that made him seem older than his years. He simply nodded, awaiting her purpose. "Serafina spoke of an ark," Elara said, the words feeling fragile in the vast silence of the evening. "A vessel to carry us through the flood, a new beginning." She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not outright disbelief, but a thoughtful consideration. "She said I was to lead its building." Kael set down his plane, wiping his hands on his trousers. He picked up a piece of timber, turning it over in his hands, feeling its grain. "An ark." He repeated the word, a low murmur. "That would require much wood, much skill, much time." His gaze drifted towards the churning river, then back to Elara. "Many hands, I know," Elara admitted, her voice tightening with a fresh wave of anxiety. "The others, they don't see it. They're afraid, Kael, and weary." He remained silent for a long moment, his focus seemingly on the wood, but Elara sensed his mind working, calculating, weighing possibilities. He was a pragmatist, grounded in the tangible world of timber and tools. "Serafina is rarely wrong," he finally said, his voice quiet. "And you, Elara, you have seen us through the red cough. You have given us hope when there was none." He looked at her then, a deep, steady gaze that seemed to penetrate her very core. "What do you see, Elara, in this ark?" Her breath caught in her throat. This was it, her chance to articulate the vision that burned within her. "I see not just a boat, Kael," she said, her voice gaining strength, conviction blossoming within her. "I see a promise that we will endure, a promise to our children that they will have a future. I see a place where all of Oakhaven can be safe, where the red cough cannot reach us, where the waters cannot drown us." Her eyes shone with an unyielding determination. "It will be immense, yes, it will be difficult, but it will be our defiance against despair. It will be our collective will made manifest." Kael continued to look at her, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a slow breath. He walked over to a stack of tools, picked up a large, well-worn axe, and tested its weight. "If Serafina speaks of it, and you believe it," he said, turning back to face her, "then it must be. I will help you, Elara. He looked at the axe in his hand, then back at the river. It will be the greatest challenge we have ever faced, but I will lend my hands to it. A profound sense of relief washed over Elara, so potent it almost brought tears to her eyes. Kyle's quiet commitment was more than just an offer of help. It was an anchor, a testament to the possibility that others might also come to believe. His pragmatism, often perceived as cynicism by some, was, in fact, his greatest strength. If Kyle, the practical, grounded Kyle, could see the vision, then perhaps others could too. The next morning, Kyle was already at the riverbank, assessing the water levels, drawing diagrams in the mud with a stick. Elara, buoyed by his commitment, began to approach others with renewed vigor. She sought out Jax, the sharp-tongued, quick-witted villager, known for his resourcefulness and ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. Jax was always skeptical, always questioning, but Elara knew his keen mind would be invaluable. She found him attempting to patch a leak in his own rain-battered roof, muttering curses under his breath. "Jax," she called, "I need your help." He looked down from his precarious perch, a sarcastic smirk playing on his lips. "And what grand scheme has the village savior cooked up now? Another potion, a charm against roof leaks?" Elara took a deep breath. "An ark, Jax, to save us from the flood." Jax scoffed, nearly losing his footing. "An ark? Are you mad, Elara? You've been listening to Seraphina's old tales too long. We can barely keep our homes from crumbling, and you want to build a floating village?" "It's not just a tale, Jax," Elara insisted, her voice firm. "The rain isn't stopping. The river is rising. And Seraphina, she has never been wrong about what truly matters." She met his cynical gaze directly. "We need your mind, Jax. Your ability to see beyond the obvious. How do we move enormous trees? How do we fashion tools when ours are failing? We need your cleverness." Jax stared at her, his usual retort dying on his tongue. He saw not a naive girl, but a young woman whose eyes held the same unwavering conviction that had driven her to face down the red cough. He saw the genuine, desperate hope in her face. He scoffed again, but this time there was less derision in it, more a grudging curiosity. He looked at the relentlessly falling rain, then back at Elara. "All right, Elara," he said, a weary sigh escaping him. "Tell me your impossible plan, but don't expect miracles. I deal in wood and rope, not in ancient prophecies." He climbed down from the roof, his expression still skeptical, but his footsteps now heading towards her, a tentative step towards the improbable. The seeds of the ark were being sown, not in grand pronouncements, but in quiet, individual commitments, one weary heart at a time. The path ahead was daunting, fraught with uncertainty and the constant threat of the rising waters, but for the first time since the prophecy, a fragile, determined hope began to stir in Oak Haven. building against the storm. The crisp morning air, usually filled with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, now carried the sharper tang of freshly cut pine and the metallic clang of hammers against stone. The chosen site, a flat expanse just beyond the village's last protective tree line, buzzed with an unfamiliar energy. Ilara, her hands already chafed from hauling timber, supervised the initial groundbreaking. Kyle, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously marked out the colossal footprint of Seraphina's vessel, his movements precise and economical. Jax, surprisingly, was not entirely absent. He perched on a stack of rough-hewn planks, arms crossed, offering a running commentary of sardonic observations on the inefficiency of their methods. "You know," Jax drawled, as a particularly gnarled root proved stubborn, "if we'd just built this thing before the red cough, we could have used all the healthy hands. Now it's like trying to knit a sweater with half a dozen fingers tied behind your back." Ilara merely smiled, wiping a bead of sweat from her temple. "Then we'll learn to knit with our toes, Jax." The early days were a grueling dance of improvisation and sheer will. Timber, once plentiful, was now a precious commodity, felled and sawn with aching slowness. Every sturdy oak, every resilient fir, felt like a small victory. Kyle, with his quiet determination, was the anchor of the effort. His knowledge of joinery and foundation work invaluable. He fashioned rudimentary tools from scavenged metal, sharpening axes and chisels until they gleamed. Old Man Tiber, a carpenter whose hands were as knotted and ancient as the trees he once felled, initially watched from a distance, a scowl a permanent fixture on his weathered face. He'd lost his wife and grandson to the red cough, and his heart seemed as scarred as his hands. Ilara approached him one evening, carrying a flask of spiced cider and a small, perfectly carved wooden bird. "Tiber," she said softly, extending the offering. "We need your wisdom." He squinted at the bird, then at her, his eyes like chips of flint. "Wisdom doesn't build an ark, girl. Hard graft does. And you lot are fumbling like newborn lambs." "Perhaps," Ilara conceded, "but even lambs need a shepherd and a master carpenter to show them how to brace a hull against a tempest." Sash. She placed the bird gently in his calloused hand. "This is for your grandson. I remember he loved the wrens that nested by your shed." A flicker, something akin to pain, crossed Tiber's face. He clutched the bird, his gaze fixed on its tiny, lifelike wings. The next morning he was there, not with a hammer, but with a piece of charcoal, sketching intricate designs for the keel, his grumpy pronouncements punctuated by surprisingly sharp observations. His presence, initially a source of dread for the less experienced builders, soon became a demanding but invaluable guide. As the weeks bled into months, the skeletal ribs of the ark began to rise, a testament to their unwavering effort. It was a crude patchwork creation, fashioned from different woods, some still green, others seasoned, But it was theirs, the villagers, their numbers dwindling, still found strength to contribute, bringing meager rations, singing ancient work songs, or simply offering a comforting hand. Then came the storm. It had been brewing for days, the air thick and heavy, the sky a bruised purple. Jax, who had surprisingly become an adept at rigging and lashing, had warned them. This isn't just a drizzle, Ilara. This feels different. They had done what they could, securing loose timbers, reinforcing temporary braces, but nothing could have prepared them for the tempest that unleashed itself upon Oakhaven. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing through the village, ripping thatch from roofs, sending planks skittering like autumn leaves. Rain lashed down in sheets, turning the ground into a churning quagmire. Ilara, huddled under a lean-to with Kyle and Tiber, watched in horror as the half-finished ark groaned and shrieked. A sudden deafening crack echoed over the storm's roar. A massive crossbeam, one they had struggled for days to hoist, splintered and crashed, sending a cascade of smaller timbers tumbling into the muddy abyss. Kyle let out a ragged cry of despair. No, all that work. Tiber, usually stoic, buried his face in his hands. "It's over," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "Seraphina's vision. It was too grand. We are too weak." The storm raged through the night, a brutal, relentless assault. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky with weak, watery hues, the scene was one of utter devastation. The ark, their fragile beacon of hope, was a ruin. Twisted timbers lay scattered, a gaping maw, where the hull should have been. The ground around it was a mire of mud and broken wood. Silence hung heavy over the site, broken only by the drip of water from sodden branches. The villagers, their faces etched with exhaustion and profound grief, wandered through the wreckage, their shoulders slumped. Hope, so painstakingly nurtured, seemed to have been washed away with the storm. Ilara walked among them, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. She saw Kyle sitting on an overturned bucket, head in his hands, his usual quiet strength utterly broken. She saw old man Tiber staring blankly at the ruined keel, the wooden bird still clutched in his hand. She knelt beside Kyle, placing a hand on his trembling shoulder. "Kyle," she said, her voice soft but firm. He didn't look up. "It's done, Ilara. We can't. We just can't. We put everything into it. It's gone." Ilara took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the wreckage, then out to the faces of her disheartened people. Despair was a potent enemy, more insidious than the storm itself. "Look around you," she began, her voice gaining strength, carrying over the quiet murmurs. "Yes, the storm took much. It took our timbers, our temporary shelters, our peace of mind." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "But it did not take our hands. It did not take our minds. It did not take the knowledge Kyle has poured into every joint. or the wisdom Tiber has shared with every brace. She stood facing the gathered villagers, her slight frame radiating an unyielding resolve. Seraphina's prophecy wasn't just about a flood or an ark. It was about us, about what we can build when we stand together. This storm, it was merely a test, a brutal, agonizing test, yes, but a test nonetheless, and we are not broken. Her eyes, usually so gentle, now burned with a fierce light. We learned from every beam we hoisted, every nail we hammered. We are stronger now, wiser. We know what failed, and we know how to make it stronger, better. This isn't a defeat. This is a lesson, etched into the very mud beneath our feet. She looked directly at Kyle, her gaze unwavering. Kyle, you are the most meticulous craftsman I know. We will rebuild, and this time, we will build it so strong, so true, that no storm, no matter how fierce, will break it. We will not build against the storm. We will build for the future, for the children who will never know the red cough, for the generations who will remember Oak Haven as the place where hope refused to drown. A few heads began to rise. A spark, faint but undeniable, flickered in their eyes. We will salvage what we can, Ilara continued, her voice ringing with conviction. We will scour the forest for fallen trees. We will mend what is broken, and we will rebuild, piece by painstaking piece, not out of desperation, but out of defiance, out of a sacred promise to ourselves and to those we have lost. She extended her hand towards the ruined ark, not in sorrow, but in resolve. Who is with me? Who will help me build Oak Haven's salvation, not from what remains, but from what we have learned? Slowly, hesitantly at first, Cale pushed himself to his feet. His eyes, still red-rimmed, met hers, and a flicker of his old determination returned. He picked up a splintered piece of wood, testing its weight. We'll need more nails, he said, his voice rough but firm, and a new main mast. This one's beyond repair. Old Man Tiber, his face still grim, slowly unfolded his fingers. The wooden bird was still safe in his palm. He tucked it carefully into his tunic and stood, his gaze now fixed on the wreckage, not with despair, but with critical assessment. We'll need a deeper keel, he grumbled, more to himself than to Ilara, and better bracing for the bow. A wave of relief, profound and encompassing, washed over Ilara. They were not defeated. They were bruised, battered, but not broken. The ark would rise again, a testament to their enduring spirit, forged not just from wood and nail, but from an unyielding belief in hope and the power of a community united. The storm had tested them, but in its wake, it had also revealed the true depth of their resolve, the spreading plague, the persistent scent of medicinal herbs, usually a comfort in its familiarity, now hung heavy in the air of Dr. Anya's clinic, tinged with something sharper, more acrid. Ilara, her hands raw from the ark's timbers, felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach as she watched Anya meticulously relabel vials, her brow furrowed in concentration. The doctor's usual brisk movements were punctuated by moments of stillness, her gaze fixed on the microscope's eyepiece, a silent battle playing out across her face. "It's changing, Ilara," Anya said at last, her voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated with an urgency that pierced the clinic's hushed atmosphere. She straightened, pushing a stray lock of dark hair from her face. Her eyes, usually so clear and analytical, now held a depth of worry Ilara had rarely seen. The red cough, it's mutating, spreading faster, more aggressively than before. Ilara's heart seized. She had seen the red cough's devastation firsthand, had felt the grief of Oakhaven as it claimed for families, leaving empty chairs and hollow echoes. To hear it was worsening, even with the Ark's construction offering a glimmer of hope. Felt like a cruel twist of fate. How much faster?" she managed, her throat suddenly dry. Anya gestured towards a cluster of new charts pinned to the wall, their red markings far denser than the previous weeks. "The incubation period has shortened, and the virulence, it's unlike anything I've encountered. We're seeing more severe symptoms, quicker progression. Even those with robust constitutions are succumbing within days, not weeks." She picked up a small sealed vial, holding it up to the light. "The cellular structure is more complex, more resilient. It's adapting, Ilara, and it's doing so at an alarming rate." A chilling silence descended, broken only by the distant, rhythmic thud of hammers from the Ark site, a sound that suddenly felt terribly fragile against the invisible, encroaching threat. Ilara thought of the faces she'd seen that morning, the determined smiles, the shared purpose. How would they react to this news? How would she tell them? Serafina, who had been sitting quietly in a corner, observing, now spoke, her voice a soft counterpoint to Anya's scientific gravity. The old text spoke of such times, when the blight grew ravenous, devouring all in its path. It is a test, Ilara, a trial of the spirit. Her ancient eyes, though clouded by age, held a fierce, unwavering light. Your immunity, it is no longer just a blessing. It is the very foundation of our hope. The weight of Serafina's words settled on Ilara, heavy and undeniable. She had always known her immunity was vital, but now, with the plague evolving, it felt like an anchor in a storm, a solitary point of steadfastness amidst a rising tide of fear. A cold dread snaked through her, not for herself, but for the faces she imagined in the village, the people relying on her. Over the next few days, Anya's grim prognosis became a horrifying reality. The telltale cough, dry and hacking at first, then rattling with fluid, became a common sound, no longer relegated to the isolated sick tents. New red markers bloomed across Anya's charts, spreading like a malignant rash across the map of Oakhaven. The village, once bustling with the coordinated chaos of ark construction, began to fall silent. Piece by piece, the sight of a new red ribbon tied to a neighbor's door, signifying a household struck by the red cough, was no longer an occasional sorrow, but a daily occurrence. Laughter died on lips. Shared meals became solitary affairs, eaten in the hushed anxiety of one's own home. Children, usually boisterous and carefree, clung to their parents, their eyes wide with unspoken questions. The air itself seemed to thicken with unspoken fear, a palpable shroud descending over Oakhaven. Elara walked among them, her heart aching with each new setback. She saw Kyle, his usual cheerful banter replaced by a grim set to his jaw, his movements stiff with worry as he helped carry supplies to a quarantined family. She saw Tiber, his hands still nimble with wood, but his eyes haunted by the memories of his own loss, now magnified by the plague's resurgence. One morning, she found a group of workers, their faces pale and drawn, simply staring at the half-finished ark, hammers lying abandoned beside them. One man, Silas, his voice raspy with despair, spoke for them all. "What's the point, Elara? We build this great boat only to die before it's finished. My wife, she's got the cough. My boy, too." His voice broke and he buried his face in his hands. The scene ripped at Elara's soul. This was the despair she had fought so hard to overcome after the first ark collapsed. This was a different kind of flood, an invisible tide that threatened to drown their spirit before the water even rose. She knelt beside Silas, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "Silas, I understand your fear. I truly do. But this ark, it's more than just wood and nails. It's our promise. It's our future." She looked up, her gaze sweeping across the weary faces of the workers, then to the massive hull of Seraphina's ark, reaching toward the sky like a testament to their unwavering will. Dr. Anya has told us the truth. The plague is growing stronger, and that means our work, our dedication, must grow stronger still. A ripple of murmuring went through the group. Some avoided her gaze, others looked at her with a mixture of resignation and a flicker of something almost like anger. Why her? Why was she spared this insidious sickness while their loved ones suffered? Elara met their eyes one by one. "I know what you're thinking," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the murmurs. "Why me? Why am I still standing here while others fall ill? I don't have all the answers, but I know this: my immunity, the very thing that sets me apart, also binds me to you now more than ever." She rose, drawing strength from the collective gaze, from the sheer enormity of their shared struggle. "I can work without fear of contagion. I can be where others cannot, and that means I will work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, for every one of you who cannot, for every one of you who is afraid, for every one of you who is sick." Her voice, though gentle, resonated with an unwavering resolve that seemed to cut through the thick air of despair. "We lost an ark once. We rebuilt. We will not let this plague break us. We will not let it steal our hope. We will build this ark for Oak Haven, for our children, for the future we promised them. We will build it with every ounce of strength we have left. And for those who are too weak to lift a hammer, we will lift it for them. A silence followed, heavy with the weight of her words, of their fear, and of a fragile, nascent hope. Then, slowly, Silas picked up his hammer. His movements were still sluggish, but he held it. One by one, others followed suit, their faces still etched with worry. But a spark, however faint, had been rekindled in their eyes. Ilara knew it wouldn't be easy. The plague would continue its relentless march. Fear would gnaw at their resolve. But looking at the determined, if weary, faces of her people, she felt a surge of fierce dedication. She was their anchor. She was their immune shield, and she would not falter. She would work until her hands bled, until her body ached, until the ark stood ready, a defiant testament to Oak Haven's unwavering spirit in the face of annihilation, a leader's sacrifice. The rhythmic thwack of Ilara's axe against a thick log was the village's new heartbeat. While others succumbed to the cough or retreated into fear-stricken homes, she toiled, a solitary figure moving with the tireless grace of a seasoned lumberjack. Dawn found her already hauling timber, her breath pluming in the crisp morning air, and dusk often caught her still planing planks by the flickering lamplight, her silhouette dancing against the growing arc. Kyle, silent as ever, became her shadow, mirroring her efforts, his sturdy frame a testament to unwavering support. He'd bring her meager meals, a hunk of bread, some dried fruit, which she'd devour quickly, her eyes never leaving the half-finished hull that loomed larger each day. Her skin, once sun-kissed and soft, was now calloused and rough, her muscles singing with a constant ache. Yet a fierce light burned in her eyes, fueled by the knowledge that every swing of her hammer, every smoothed plank, was a defiance against the encroaching darkness. She was the immune one, the chosen one, and she would not falter. Old man Tiber, initially a skeptical observer from his forge, grumbled about the racket, his shop, tucked away near the edge of Oak Haven, usually hummed with the delicate clang of his hammer shaping intricate ironwork for farming tools. Now, the heavy thuds from the arc site rattled his windows. One afternoon, Ilara approached him, her face smudged with sawdust, a hopeful glint in her tired eyes. "Old man Tiber," she began, her voice hoarse but clear, "we need your skill. The ark requires robust iron fittings, hinges that will withstand the coming storms, and bolts that will hold true. No one in Oak Haven crafts metal like you." Tiber, his brow furrowed deeper than usual, squinted at her over the rim of his spectacles. "You think a few fancy hinges will save you from the sky-falling girl?" he rasped, his voice like gravel. "Foolishness, I tell you, all of it." "Perhaps," Ilara replied, her gaze steady. "But we build it nonetheless, for Oak Haven, for its future." She laid out a crude drawing of a massive iron brace, her fingers tracing the lines with determination. "These need to be strong, Tiber, strong enough to hold the world together." He snatched the drawing, his fingers surprisingly nimble despite their age. He studied it, then her, a flicker of something unreadable in his rheumy eyes. "Fine," he grumbled, turning back to his bellows. "But don't expect miracles. And don't come crying when it all goes to rust." From that day, the rhythmic clang, clang, clang of Tiber's hammer joined the symphony of construction. He worked with a fierce concentration, his ancient forge blazing hotter than ever, creating hinges that gleamed with strength, bolts thick as a man's thumb, and braces that promised unyielding support. He rarely spoke, but each perfectly crafted piece he delivered to the arc site was a testament to his tacit commitment. He'd simply drop them off, a curt nod to Elara, and retreat, leaving behind the undeniable proof of his contribution. While Tiber's metalwork fortified the ark's skeleton, Lyra, with her boundless energy and innate understanding of animals, tackled another critical aspect: preparing for Oakhaven's animal passengers. The thought of bringing all creatures, great and small, aboard the Ark had initially seemed an impossible feat, a task almost as daunting as building the vessel itself. But Lyra, undeterred, saw only a challenge. She began by meticulously charting the village's livestock, talking to farmers, assessing the health of their herds. Her small, nimble fingers, accustomed to braiding horses' manes, now sketched out complex designs for stalls and enclosures within the ark's lower decks. She gathered dried grasses, prepared feed mixtures, and even began training some of the more skittish animals to enter enclosed spaces, her gentle voice a constant, soothing presence. Jax, ever the cynic, watched her efforts with a detached amusement. "You seriously think a couple of sheep and a cow will survive a world-ending flood, Lyra?" He'd sneer, leaning against a stack of timber, a half-eaten apple in his hand. "There'll be fish food before the first wave hits." Lyra, her hands full of straw, simply smiled. "They deserve a chance, Jax. Every living creature does." Her conviction was unwavering, a quiet strength that began to chip away at Jax's hardened shell. He saw her working late into the evening, her brow furrowed in concentration, her small frame radiating an unwavering dedication. He saw Elara working even later, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, yet her gaze still fixed on the horizon, on the future. One particularly cold evening, as Elara struggled to maneuver a particularly heavy beam into place, her muscles screaming in protest, Jax found himself walking towards her. He'd intended to simply observe, perhaps offer a sarcastic remark. But as he watched her strain, the raw effort etched on her face. Something shifted within him. The red cough had taken his younger sister, and the thought of another loss, of Oakhaven being swallowed by a flood, gnawed at him more than he cared to admit. He dropped his apple core. "You're going to break yourself, Elara," he said, his voice devoid of its usual mocking tone. He walked over, his strong hands finding purchase on the timber. Without another word, he helped her lift the beam, guiding it into its slot with surprising precision. Elara looked at him, surprise and gratitude washing over her tired features. "Jax," she breathed, a small smile touching her lips. He shrugged, feigning indifference. "Don't get any ideas. Just can't stand to see a job done poorly." But he stayed. He helped Elara secure the beam, then moved to the next task. His cynicism temporarily overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of responsibility. He found himself sketching out more efficient ways to hoist materials. His sharp mind, once focused on self-preservation, now applying itself to the collective good. The red cough continued its relentless march, each day bringing fresh grief, each cough a stark reminder of the looming catastrophe. Yet amidst the despair, the ark rose higher, a testament to Elara's unwavering vision and the growing unity of her people. Her own strength, while seemingly limitless, was being tested. She often ate little, slept less, driven by an internal fire that burned brighter than any torch. Kyle worried, his silent glances conveying a depth of concern he couldn't articulate. Lyra, noticing Elara's pale face and increasingly hollow eyes, would press extra rations into her hands, her empathy overriding her usual shyness. The prophecy of the Great Flood, once a chilling tale, now felt like a living, breathing threat. But so did the Ark, a tangible response to that threat, a vessel of hope forged by the hands of a village united under Elara's selfless leadership. She was not merely directing, she was doing, leading by example, her sacrifice silently inspiring every swing of a hammer, every knot tied, every plank laid. The future of Oakhaven, and perhaps even more, rested on her tireless shoulders, and Elara, the farmer's daughter, bore the weight with a quiet, fierce determination. The waters rise. A distant rumble, initially dismissed as thunder, grew into a persistent, unsettling growl that vibrated through the very foundations of Oakhaven. The air, already thick with the scent of damp earth and the frantic activity around the ark, suddenly tasted metallic, charged with an unspoken dread. Elara, hauling a heavy timber alongside a visibly weary Kyle, paused, her gaze drawn to the river. It was no longer the familiar placid ribbon winding through the valley. It had swollen, its banks overflowing, a muddy torrent now creeping across the low-lying fields. Panic, a cold, sharp blade, cut through the organized chaos of the ark site. A cry erupted from the village edge, a woman's voice, high-pitched and laced with terror. "The water! It's here!" The rhythmic thud of hammers faltered, the rasp of saws ceased. Every head turned. What had been a trickle just hours ago was now a surging tide, consuming the last vestiges of fertile ground, inching relentlessly towards the village homes. Fear, raw and visceral, gripped the community. Whispers turned to shouts, shouts to frantic, questions. Children, sensing the shift in their parents' demeanor, began to whimper. Elara felt the dread, a heavy stone in her stomach, but her resolve hardened. This was not unexpected. The prophecies had spoken of it. Now was not the time for despair, but for action. "We knew this was coming," she boomed, her voice cutting through the rising din. "We prepared for this." Every swing of the hammer, every nail driven, was for this moment. Kyle, his face grim but determined, immediately moved to secure a stack of tools that threatened to be swept away. "She's right," he grunted, his eyes fixed on Elara, a silent promise of unwavering support. "No time to waste, we keep going." But the rising waters brought more than just panic. The air, heavy with moisture and a strange, cloying sweetness, seemed to carry something insidious. It started subtly, a persistent cough rippling through the remaining workers, more frequent, more ragged than before. The red cough, dormant for weeks, now flared with a terrifying vengeance, as if the impending flood had stirred its sleeping embers. Dr. Anya, her face etched with exhaustion and worry, emerged from the makeshift infirmary, her eyes wide with alarm. "It's spreading faster than ever," she announced, her voice strained. "A new strain, I think, more virulent. People are collapsing within hours." She pointed to a young man, barely more than a boy, who had just dropped a plank and was clutching his chest, his face already flushed a dangerous crimson. Elara watched, her heart clenching. This was the final cruel blow. The very people needed to finish the arc were being incapacitated, one by one. The village, already depleted by the previous waves of the plague, was now facing its greatest challenge. The arc, so close to completion, suddenly seemed impossibly far. She moved with purpose, her movements fluid and unburdened by the cough that racked others. First, she went to the young man, helping him to a shaded spot, fetching him water. Then she turned to the ark. The main deck was nearly finished, but the ramps for the animals were still skeletal. The large timber door, a marvel of Old Man Tiber's stubborn craftsmanship, lay unhinged, awaiting its final placement. "Kyle, we need that door up," Elara commanded, her voice firm. "Now, if the water gets much higher, we won't be able to maneuver it." Kyle, already stripped to the waist, muscles straining, nodded. He was one of the few still strong, still unaffected by the new strain. But even his powerful frame couldn't lift the massive door alone. Elara didn't hesitate. She joined him, her smaller frame surprisingly capable as she heaved against the heavy wood. Others, seeing their leader's unwavering resolve and ignoring the scratch in their own throats, rallied. Old Man Tiber, surprisingly robust, despite his years and the telltale flush on his cheeks, hobbled over, offering terse instructions, his gnarled hands surprisingly steady as he guided the door into place. But as the day wore on, more workers fell. The rhythmic sounds of construction grew increasingly sporadic, replaced by the hacking coughs and the moans of the sick. Dr. Anya ran from person to person, her scientific mind racing against the clock. But even her formidable knowledge was struggling against this rapid, brutal assault. The infirmary overflowed. Lyra, her face streaked with dirt and tears, emerged from the animal pens. Her usual vibrant enthusiasm was dimmed, replaced by a desperate urgency. "Ilara, the chickens are restless. And the goats. They're panicking with the water so close. We need to get them inside soon, but I can't manage them all by myself." Ilara felt a pang of guilt. Lyra, with her singular focus on the animals, rarely asked for help. This new flood of panic from her charges was overwhelming her. "I'm coming, Lyra," Ilara promised, quickly securing the last hinge of the door. "Kyle," the interior bracing on the upper deck. "It's critical. And check on the water collection systems. We'll need every drop." Kyle simply nodded, his eyes meeting hers for a brief, understanding moment before he turned and clambered up the internal ladders. Ilara found Lyra struggling with a particularly stubborn goat, its eyes wide with fear, tugging against its tether. The water was now lapping at the edge of the animal pens, threatening to sweep them away. "Here, let me," Ilara said gently, taking the lead rope. Her calm presence seemed to soothe the agitated animal almost instantly. Together, they herded the frantic animals, coaxing them up the newly built ramps. It was slow, arduous work, made harder by the animals' increasing distress and the dwindling number of able hands. Each time a worker coughed, Ilara's heart ached, but she pushed the pain aside. She was immune, a strange and terrible blessing in these darkening hours. She had to be strong for everyone. The sky, which had been a dull gray for days, now burst open. Rain, cold and relentless, lashed down, mingling with the rising floodwaters. The river, no longer a distinct entity, merged with the overflowing fields, transforming the valley into a vast churning lake. The Ark, once a towering structure on dry land, now sat in a swirling expanse of muddy water. Ilara worked tirelessly, moving from task to task, her energy seemingly boundless. She helped lift timbers, she tightened ropes, she carried the sick to the infirmary, her touch gentle but firm. She was everywhere, a beacon of tireless determination in the deepening gloom. Her voice, though sometimes hoarse from shouting over the wind and rain, remained a steady, encouraging presence. "We can do this," she yelled, her words barely audible above the storm, as she helped Old Man Tiber secure a final, vital rope. "We will do this, for Oakhaven, for our future." The old man, his face pale and slick with rain, managed a weak, knowing nod. He looked at her, a flicker of awe in his weary eyes. She was more than just a girl. She was the embodiment of their last hope. As darkness fell, the Ark swayed gently on the rising waters, a testament to Oakhaven's improbable resilience. But the village below, was nearly submerged, and the last, most virulent strain of Boren's syndrome had claimed nearly all who remained. Ilara, immune and unyielding, was now the primary force keeping the Ark project from succumbing to the twin onslaughts of plague and flood. Her self-sacrifice, once a quiet tendency, had become the very engine of their survival. The final countdown. The chilling wind whipped Ilara's hair across her face, stinging her eyes with sleet. Below, the river, usually a placid ribbon, now surged with a terrifying roar, consuming the last vestiges of Oakhaven's fields. "We have no more time," she announced, her voice cutting through the din of the storm, though it trembled slightly. Kyle, beside her, paused in tightening a last rope, his gaze fixed on her. Lyra, clutching a shivering rabbit, looked up, her brow furrowed with concern. Dr. Anya, her face grim, adjusted her spectacles, her analytical mind already calculating the impossible. Farmer McGregor, his usually ruddy face pale, gripped the Ark's railing, his knuckles white. "Listen closely," Ilara continued, her voice gaining strength. "Every available space inside the Ark is allocated. We have accounted for every soul, every animal we could save. But the waters, they are rising faster than we predicted. One of us must stay outside to ensure the final boarding is complete, to guide the last ones in as the entrance begins to submerge." A collective gasp rippled through the small group gathered on the Ark's nearly submerged gangplank. "Ilara, no!" Lyra cried, her voice cracking. "You can't mean—" Ilara met Lyra's wide, fearful eyes, a sad, resolute smile gracing her lips. "It has to be me," she said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "I am immune to the red cough. My presence inside is not as critical as ensuring everyone else is safe. My strength, my ability to move quickly and withstand the cold, it's best utilized here, now." Kale stepped forward, his face a mask of quiet desperation. "Ilara, think this through. There must be another way." His voice was rough, uncharacteristic for him. "There isn't, Kyle," she replied softly, placing a hand on his arm, a gesture of comfort, not apology. "The prophecy spoke of Oakhaven's last hope. It spoke of sacrifice. This is it." Dr. Anya interjected, her tone clipped with urgency. "Ilara, your immunity, your unique biology, it's the key to everything, to the cure. We cannot risk losing you." Ilara turned to the doctor, her gaze unwavering. "And what good is a cure if there's no one left to save? My purpose is to ensure Oakhaven endures, even if it means I cannot witness its future." Farmer McGregor, usually so stoic, cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously bright. He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of her grim logic, his fear momentarily overridden by awe. The sky had turned and bruised purple, casting an ominous pall over the rapidly shrinking world. The roar of the river was now a deafening symphony of destruction, punctuated by the splintering sounds of trees and structures being ripped from their foundations. The Ark, a colossal silhouette against the churning water, was almost fully afloat, its massive hull groaning under the strain. Farmer McGregor, you take the last family, the Millers, and their livestock. Lyra, help them secure the goats. Kyle, you are with me. We will handle the final ascent of the larger animals. Elara commanded, her leadership absolute. There was no time for debate, only action. A last desperate wave of humanity, huddled together against the horizontal rain, appeared through the driving sleet. It was the Miller family, their faces etched with terror, their 2 children clinging to their parents, a small huddle of sheep, and 1 exhausted cow being prodded along. Lyra, despite her earlier protest, sprang into action, her empathy overriding her fear. She guided the sheep toward the ramp, her gentle voice a calming balm against the storm's fury. The floodwaters were now lapping at the very edge of the gangplank, threatening to dislodge it from the ark's entrance. The ark itself swayed precariously, a colossal vessel struggling against the rising tempest. The remaining section of the gangplank, meant for easy access, now resembled a perilous bridge over a raging abyss. Carefully now, Elara shouted over the wind, her voice strained. She and Kale worked in grim tandem, their movements precise and practiced. The cow, its eyes wide with terror, balked at the steep incline. Its hooves slipped on the slick wood. Elara, despite her slender frame, positioned herself behind it, bracing against its immense weight. Kyle, with a powerful heave, pulled on the rope secured around its neck, guiding it forward. "Push, Elara, push!" Kyle yelled, his muscles straining. Elara grunted, her shoulder pressed against the cow's flank, urging it up the ramp. The water swirled around her boots, icy and relentless. She felt the chill seep into her bones, but her resolve burned brighter than any flame. Just as the cow's front hooves found purchase on the ark's deck, a massive wave surged, crashing over the gangplank. The wooden structure groaned, then tore free from its moorings with a sickening crack. "The gangplank!" Dr. Anya cried from the safety of the ark's entrance, her voice laced with panic. "It's gone!" Elara, now standing in waist-deep water, the current pulling at her with monstrous strength, barely registered the loss. Her focus was entirely on the last remaining people, the Millers. They were stranded on the rapidly shrinking patch of dry land, their faces pale with despair. "Jump!" Elara screamed, pointing to the ark's lower deck, which was now just a few feet above the water. "Kyle will catch you!" Kyle, his face grim, extended a powerful arm, bracing himself against the ark's railing. The Miller father, clutching his smallest child, took a terrifying leap, landing awkwardly but safely in Kyle's embrace. The mother, holding the elder child, followed, her scream swallowed by the wind. Elara watched them clamber aboard, a wave of relief washing over her. She knew her sacrifice was complete. All were safe. All were in. "Elara, come on," Kyle bellowed, his voice raw with urgency, his hand outstretched. He was just inside the ark, peering down at her, his face a contorted mask of desperation. The ark was beginning to drift, slowly pulling away from the submerged land. The gap between her and the vessel was widening with every passing second. The water was now chest high, a frigid embrace that threatened to drag her under. Elara looked up at Kyle, her heart aching with a love she hadn't realized was so profound. She saw Lyra's tear-streaked face, Dr. Anya's solemn gaze, Farmer McGregor's silent plea. She smiled, a brave, weary smile that belied the terror she surely felt. "My journey ends here, Kyle," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady, though it was barely audible above the storm's howl. "The ark must sail. Oakhaven's future depends on it." A single tear escaped Kyle's eye, a testament to his unspoken sorrow. He watched helpless as Elara, the indomitable spirit of Oakhaven, the girl who had defied plague and despair, was slowly, irrevocably claimed by the rising floodwaters. Her silhouette, a beacon of courage against the raging storm, grew smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the churning darkness. The ark, a vessel of hope and sorrow, groaned and lurched, then began its slow, deliberate journey into the unknown, carrying the fragile hope of a new world upon its massive shoulders. The ceiling of the ark, the roar of the flood, was a living thing, a hungry beast devouring Oakhaven. Elara, water already up to her chest, felt its cold embrace trying to drag her under. The last family, a terrified mother clutching two small children, their faces streaked with tears, had scrambled onto the gangplank's splintered remains, Kyle's strong arm pulling them aboard, just before the wood gave way completely. A final bleating lamb, eyes wide with fear, had been pushed towards her, and Elara, with a strength born of desperation, heaved it onto the deck, its wool heavy with rain. Now, only she remained outside, the massive ark door looming before her, a dark maw threatening to swallow the last vestiges of light. Inside, Kyle's face was a mask of anguish, his hand outstretched through the narrow gap. "Elara, no! Don't do this," he pleaded, his voice a raw rasp against the din of the storm. Dr. Anya, her face pale, pressed a hand to the doorframe, her gaze sharp with a frantic calculation of probabilities, of life-giving biology now exposed to oblivion. Even Jax, usually so aloof, had a flicker of genuine terror in his eyes, a silent question of why. Elara ignored them, her focus absolute. The door was a behemoth of ancient oak and iron, designed to withstand the very deluge now threatening to overwhelm it. It was meant to seal Oakhaven's hope within and her fate outside. With a guttural cry, she braced herself against the rising current, her bare feet slipping on the slick wood. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest as she heaved against the massive panel. The water, a relentless, icy fist, hammered against the door, trying to force it inwards, trying to claim her. "Push, Elara, push!" Lyra's voice, surprisingly strong, sliced through the chaos from within the ark. Ilara could see her, hands pressed against the opposite side of the door, her small frame straining. The animals inside, a cacophony of anxious bleats and chirps, seemed to sense the urgency, their restless movements adding to the tension. Ilara pushed. Her lungs burned, her vision swam, but she pushed. The prophecy, spoken by the elders in hushed tones, echoed in her mind. The child of the sun, immune to the blight, shall seal the ark, securing Oakhaven's light. She was the child of the sun. She was Oakhaven's light. This was her purpose. Inch by agonizing inch, the door groaned, scraping against its frame. The gap narrowed, the roaring water now funneling through it with terrifying force, spraying her face with frigid torrents. She could hear Kael's desperate shouts, Dr. Anya's sharp commands to Lyra to brace herself. Jax, surprisingly, had joined Lyra, his shoulder pressed against the door, a grim determination replacing his usual cynicism. The light inside was fading, shrinking to a sliver. Through that sliver, Ilara saw them one last time. Kael's tear-filled eyes, reflecting her own unwavering resolve. Dr. Anya's furrowed brow, a silent plea for her to reconsider. Lyra's earnest face, radiating unwavering belief. Jax's grudging respect. These were the faces of Oakhaven, the faces of hope, the faces she was saving. A wave larger and more powerful than any before slammed into her back, nearly tearing her grip from the door. But Ilara held fast, her fingers raw, scraped against the rough wood. It was now or never. With one final titanic surge of strength, she threw her entire weight into the door. A deafening thud reverberated through the air as the heavy oak met its frame with a resounding clunk. The iron bolts, forged with ancient Oakhaven craft, slid home with a series of metallic clicks. The rushing water outside, which had been fighting her every step, now ceased its ingress. The ark was sealed. Darkness enveloped her. The last thing Ilara saw was the fading outline of the ark's hull, a massive shadow against the churning gray waters. A chilling current enveloped her, pulling her down, down, into the abyss. The cold was absolute, piercing to her very bones, a final, numbing embrace. She didn't fight it. A faint smile touched her lips, a silent testament to a promise fulfilled. The ark was safe. Oakhaven would endure. A fading sturdy ark, a behemoth of salvaged timber and desperate hope, groaned and shuddered, a defiant island in a sea of chaos. Outside, the world had dissolved into a churning gray maw where sky and water merged in a furious, indistinguishable tempest. The colossal structure, a testament to Oakhaven's collective will, rode the monstrous waves with an unsettling grace, its timbers holding firm against the onslaught. Within, a hush had fallen, thicker and heavier than the driving rain outside. Kael stood by a reinforced viewport, his knuckles white against the rough-hewn frame. His gaze was fixed on the turbulent expanse, though there was nothing left to see of Ilara. He had watched her, a shrinking figure against the darkening sky, as the floodwaters had seized her. The image was seared into his mind, her outstretched hand, not in a plea for help, but in a final, guiding gesture, before the torrent consumed her. A raw ache tightened his chest, a pain so profound it stole his breath. He had built this ark for her, with her, and now she was gone. The quiet man, who rarely spoke, felt a scream building in his throat, but it remained trapped, a silent testament to his grief. Dr. Anya, usually composed and analytical, leaned against a bulkhead, her face pale, her eyes distant. Her scientific mind, so adept at dissecting problems and finding solutions, was utterly useless against this void. Ilara, a biological anomaly, a living cure, had been more than a patient. She had been the improbable answer to a generation of suffering. Anya had seen the data, witnessed the transformation, believed in the impossible. Now, the key to their future, the very embodiment of hope, had vanished into the abyss. A single tear tracked a path down her cheek, unheeded. The weight of their survival and the cost of it pressed down on her. Lyra, her face streaked with tears, huddled with a small, shivering goat, burying her face in its soft fur. She had seen Ilara not just as a leader, but as a friend, a kindred spirit who understood the quiet language of living things. The child who had spoken of sunlight and wildflowers, who had inspired them to build this impossible vessel, was gone. The innocent hope she had carried, a bright flame in a darkening world, had been extinguished. Lyra's heart ached with a grief that felt too large for her young frame. She pictured Ilara, always with a kind word, a gentle touch, and knew the world had lost something precious. Jax, ever the pragmatist, stood a little apart, his arms crossed, a grim set to his jaw. He had doubted, he had scoffed, he had questioned every step of Ilara's visionary plan. Yet he had also seen her unwavering resolve, her ability to make the impossible seem achievable. He had seen the fear in her eyes, quickly masked by a fierce determination. As she had pushed them forward, her sacrifice, an act of pure, selfless leadership, had silenced his cynicism more effectively than any argument. He clenched his jaw, battling the unfamiliar sting in his eyes. He had survived many things, but this felt different. This felt like a loss he hadn't prepared for. Serafina, her ancient face etched with a profound sorrow, sat on a low bench, her hands clasped. She had seen this coming, had read the signs in the turning of the leaves and the whispers of the wind. The prophecy spoke of a child of the sun who would lead them through the darkness and then return to the light. Ilara had fulfilled her destiny, a beacon guiding them through the tempest, only to sacrifice herself for their continuation. There was a quiet strength in Serafina's grief, a reverence for the sacred cycle of life and death. Her eyes, though clouded with tears, held a distant, knowing peace. Ilara's spirit, she knew, would forever guide them. Farmer McGregor, leaning heavily against a stack of feed bags, wiped a calloused hand across his eyes. He had been skeptical of the ark, of the prophecies of a child leading them through such peril. But Ilara, with her quiet strength and unwavering conviction, had won him over. She had rallied the farmers, the carpenters, the skeptical and the hopeful alike. She had made them believe not just in the ark, but in themselves. His gruff exterior cracked, revealing the raw pain beneath. He had lost a piece of Oakhaven, a piece of his own heart in the raging waters. His family was safe, his community preserved, but at what an unbearable cost. The ark continued its relentless journey through the storm, each creak of its timbers a mournful lament. The light within was dim, a flickering echo of the vibrant spirit they had lost. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the crushing weight of their collective grief. They were safe for now, but the victory felt hollow, tainted by the immense sacrifice. Kael finally turned from the viewport, his eyes, usually so impassive, now burning with a quiet intensity. He met Anya's gaze, then Lyra's, then Jax's, a silent understanding passing between them. Ilara had built this ark with them, for them, and now it was their responsibility to carry her legacy forward. He moved towards a map of the region, unrolling it on a makeshift table. His hand, still trembling slightly, traced a route towards higher ground, towards a new beginning, a promise Ilara had made them. Anya, recognizing the unspoken command, straightened, a flicker of her old resolve returning. "We need to assess our provisions," she stated, her voice a little hoarse but firm, "and establish a schedule for water purification." The scientist in her was reasserting itself, a practical response to an overwhelming emotional burden. Lyra, still cradling the goat, looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. The animals, they need care, consistent care. Her voice was soft but determined. Ilara had entrusted them with this precious cargo, and Lyra would not fail her. Jax, pushing off the bulkhead, walked over to Kael, examining the map. "Higher ground is one thing, Kael. Habitable ground is another. We need to consider the long term." His cynicism was still there, a protective shell, but it was tempered with a newfound respect, a recognition of the stakes. Seraphina, rising with a slow, deliberate grace, spoke, her voice a gentle balm in the sorrow-laden air. "Ilara's spirit is with us. Her courage, her vision, they are woven into the very fabric of this vessel, into the heart of Oakhaven. We must honor her by living." Her words, ancient and profound, resonated through the ark, a quiet reminder of their purpose. Farmer McGregor, pushing away from the feed bags, nodded, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his community. "She gave us a second chance. We'd be fools to squander it." His voice was gruff, but there was a tremor in it, a testament to the depth of his feeling. The storm raged outside, a furious symphony of wind and water, but inside the ark, a different kind of resolve was taking root. The grief was still a palpable presence, a shadow clinging to every corner, but it was slowly being eclipsed by the flickering flame of hope Ilara had ignited. Her sacrifice, a fading star in the tumultuous night, had solidified her legacy, not as a martyr, but as the enduring spirit of Oakhaven, a beacon guiding them towards a future she had made possible, peaceful. They would carry her light forward, one wave, one day, one breath at a time. The journey was far from over, but thanks to Ilara, it had begun. The journey and rebirth, the ark, a colossal testament to desperation and devotion, drifted. Days bled into weeks, then months, a monotonous rhythm of creaking wood and lapping water. Inside, life found a new, constrained order. Kyle, perpetually smudged with grease and sawdust, moved with the quiet efficiency of a man who had built his own world. His hands, calloused and strong, were never idle, patching leaks, reinforcing braces, or maintaining the intricate systems that kept their fragile ecosystem alive. He rarely spoke of Ilara, but every steady hammer blow, every precise knot tied, was a silent elegy. He saw her in the sturdy planks he'd chosen, the careful curve of the hull, the very breath of the ark itself. Dr. Anya, her brow perpetually furrowed in thought, meticulously monitored their dwindling provisions and the health of the survivors. The ark's infirmary, once a bustling hub for the Red Cough, was now a quiet space of preventative care and the occasional minor injury. She measured every ration, analyzed every water sample, her scientific mind a bulwark against the rising tide of uncertainty. "We have enough for another 3 weeks at this rate," she'd announce at the bi-weekly council meetings, her voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of their collective fate. Her gaze often drifted to the small, carefully preserved vial of Ilara's blood, a relic of their miracle, now a painful reminder of what they'd lost. Lyra, ever the gentle spirit, spent her days tending to the animals, a living menagerie of Oakhaven's legacy. The soft bleating of goats, the cooing of doves, the rustle of straw in the pen. These were the sounds that broke the ark's oceanic silence. She spoke to them in hushed tones, her hands soothing troubled fur, her empathy a quiet comfort in the cramped quarters. She missed the open fields, the scent of fresh earth, but in the innocent eyes of a newborn lamb, she saw a flicker of the future Ilara had promised. Jax, surprisingly, found purpose in the drudgery. His sharp mind, once honed for cynicism, now applied itself to logistics. He organized the stores, devised ingenious methods for waste disposal, and even, to the amusement of some, started a rotating roster for storytelling during the long, dark evenings. His sarcasm hadn't entirely vanished, but it was softer now, often laced with a wry affection for his fellow travelers. "Well, at least we haven't run out of Kale's brooding silence yet," he'd quip, earning a faint, almost imperceptible nod from the builder. Seraphina, a serene presence amidst the tumult, sat often by the ark's single, small window, her eyes scanning the vast, featureless expanse of water. She spoke little, but her presence was a balm, a living connection to the prophecies and the ancient wisdom that had guided them. She would occasionally hum old Oakhaven melodies, her voice a fragile whisper against the roar of the waves, reminding them of the world that was and the world that would be. One morning, a subtle change rippled through the ark. The rocking was less pronounced, the distant sound of waves muted. Kyle, alerted by a shift in the ark's balance, climbed to the highest deck. The air was different, heavy with a new scent, not brine, but something earthy, damp, and green. He saw it first, a faint, dark line on the horizon, not the endless gray of sky meeting water, but solid, unyielding land. A choked gasp escaped him. Words spread like wildfire. Hope, a fragile seedling nurtured in the ark's belly, burst into full bloom. Jax scrambled up beside Kyle, his usual sardonic mask replaced by wide-eyed wonder. "Well, I'll be dry land. Who would have thought?" he muttered, a genuine smile cracking his face. Dr. Anya, always the pragmatist, brought out her instruments. The depth charts indicate a significant decrease. The current is slowing. Her voice trembled, a rare display of emotion. As the ark drew closer, the details emerged from the mist. A shoreline, not of jagged rocks, but of gentle slopes. Trees, impossibly green, rose from the land, their leaves shimmering with the accumulated rain of the deluge. There was no sign of human habitation, only the raw, untamed beauty of a world reborn. The ark finally settled with a soft thud, a gentle sigh. Of wood against earth, the waters had receded, leaving behind rich, dark soil glistening with moisture. A ramp was lowered, creaking under its own weight, a bridge to their new beginning. Silence descended heavy with anticipation and a profound sense of awe. Who would take the first step? The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and unfamiliar blossoms. Lyra, holding a small trembling bird in her cupped hands, walked to the ramp. She looked back at the faces, a mix of apprehension and wonder. "Elara, she would have wanted us to," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She stepped onto the new land, her boots sinking slightly into the soft soil. The bird, released, soared into the clear sky, a tiny, vibrant speck against the vast blue. Then Kyle followed, his usually stoic face etched with an unreadable emotion. He knelt, pressing his hand into the cool, damp earth, feeling its solidity, its promise. He could almost hear Ilara's laughter in the whisper of the leaves, see her bright eyes in the sunlight filtering through the canopy. The ache of her absence was a dull throb, but beneath it, a new warmth began to spread. Dr. Anya, analytical as ever, took a soil sample, her movements precise, but her eyes, when she looked up, were filled with a raw, undeniable hope. Jax, for once, was silent, simply taking in the immensity of it all, the sheer, undeniable reality of a new world. Serafina, leaning on Kael's arm, gazed at the horizon, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "The cycle turns," she murmured, her voice resonating with ancient wisdom. "From the deepest despair, new life springs." They were not merely survivors, they were our pioneers, carrying the weight of a lost world and the fragile seed of a new one. Ilara's sacrifice had not been in vain. It had paved the way for this moment, this rebirth. The land stretched before them, untamed and boundless, waiting for their hands, their dreams, their future. And though her physical presence was gone, her spirit, a beacon of selfless courage, imbued every rustle of the leaves, every drop of dew on the grass, every beat of their hopeful hearts. The journey had ended, but the true work, the work of building a legacy worthy of Ilara, had just begun. The echo of a brave heart. The hearth's dancing light painted elongated shadows across the children's eager faces gathered close to Serafina. Her voice, a gentle river worn smooth by generations of telling, flowed through the quiet room, each syllable a brushstroke illuminating a bygone era. Beyond the window, the new moon, a forgotten silver shard, offered scant illumination to the fertile valley they now called home. The mingled scents of wood smoke and dried herbs offered a comforting balm against the advancing night's chill. And so Serafina began, her ancient eyes, clouded with age, twinkling with knowing warmth. Ilara, no older than some of you, stood before Oakhaven, not armed with a sword, nor robed in royal finery, but bearing a fragile whisper of hope and the bold promise of a dream. Her gnarled fingers, adorned with a lone polished river stone, traced the faded illustrations of a scroll. The children, eyes wide with wonder, leaned in, mesmerized by her words. On the parchment, a vibrant depiction showed a young girl with an unwavering gaze, her hair like sun-gilded wheat amidst a bustling village. She spoke of the red cough, Serafina continued, her voice dropping to a somber hush. A blight that stole breath and shattered spirits, leaving families desolate and fields barren. But Ilara, untouched by its cruel clutch, became a beacon, a tiny, unwavering flame in a world swallowed by shadow. A collective gasp rippled through the young audience. They knew the hushed tales of the red cough, a stark reminder of life's fragility and the immense power of resilience. A small boy, Finn, no more than 5, with a perpetual curtain of dark hair obscuring his eyes, piped up. But how, Serafina? How could one girl stop such a terrible thing? Serafina's smile created gentle crinkles around her eyes. Ah, little Finn, That is the very heart of Ilara's story. She vanquished not the sickness with a magic spell, but despair with courage. She quelled fear with unwavering faith. She showed them that even when the world crumbled, the human spirit could rebuild. She indicated another illustration on the scroll, a massive wooden vessel taking form, surrounded by industrious figures. She spoke of the Great Flood, a prophecy whispered by our ancestors, a deluge that would cleanse the old world and usher in a new beginning. Lyra, a young girl with intricate braids, perhaps 8 winters old, spoke next, her voice clear and thoughtful. So she built the ark. Indeed, Lyra, Seraphina affirmed, her gaze lingering on the image of the colossal ark, its wooden ribs stretching towards the heavens. Not alone, mind you. No one builds a world alone. She ignited Oakhaven's spirit. Farmers put aside their plows for axes. Weavers traded their looms for saws. Even the youngest among them hauled stones and fetched water. Ilara's immunity to the red cough was a marvel, yes, but it was her leadership, her boundless empathy, that truly moved mountains. She heard their fears, she dried their tears, and she reminded them of the latent strength within their own hearts. Seraphina's hand drifted from the scroll to a small, intricately carved wooden ark on a nearby shelf. This, she explained, holding it up, was crafted by Kyle, one of the ark's carpenters. He carried it always, a tangible reminder of the impossible dream they forged with their own hands. Her voice gained a deeper resonance. As the waters rose, threatening to engulf Oakhaven, Ilara's spirit remained unyielding. She orchestrated the gathering of seeds, of animals, of knowledge, everything essential to start anew. She was the shepherd of their future, her vision so clear, her resolve so firm that even in the face of utter annihilation, hope did not waver. Rowan, a quiet boy usually lost in thought, looked up. But what happened to Ilara? Did she come to this land with them? A hush, heavier than before, settled over the room. Seraphina's usually bright eyes dimmed slightly. She paused, choosing her words with care. The journey was long, fraught with peril. The seas churned, the winds screamed. The ark, a testament to their bravery, weathered storms that would have splintered lesser vessels. But even the strongest heart can bear only so much. Her gaze moved to a large, elaborate tapestry on the wall, a finely woven depiction of the ark on tempestuous waters, a lone figure at its helm, a beacon against the raging storm. The figure's face, though simplified, emanated an unmistakable air of determination, her hand outstretched, as if commanding the waves themselves. Ilara, Seraphina recounted, her voice thick with emotion, understood the profound burden she carried. She saw the fear in her people's eyes, the exhaustion etched onto their faces. She knew that for the ark to survive, For their new world to truly begin, a sacrifice of unimaginable magnitude was required. Serafina paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. The children, sensing the moment's solemnity, remained utterly still. She was the anchor, Serafina continued, her voice barely a whisper, the very soul of the ark. But the storms, the relentless struggle, the sheer burden of guiding so many through such darkness, it took its toll. During the fiercest tempest, when the ark groaned and threatened to splinter, Elara made her choice. She did not fall. She did not succumb. She embraced her destiny, merging her spirit with the ark itself, becoming one with the vessel, guiding it through the maelstrom with a strength that transcended the physical. Serafina gestured to another part of the tapestry, where the storm-tossed ark was now depicted with a subtle, ethereal glow emanating from within, pushing through the dark waters towards a faint glimmer of light on the horizon. Her sacrifice was not one of despair, but of ultimate love. She gave her life so that theirs might continue. Her courage, her selflessness, became the very fabric of the ark's survival, a silent promise whispered on the wind, urging them onward to the new land. Lyra, her face a mixture of sadness and awe, asked, "So she saved everyone?" "She saved the future, child," Serafina corrected gently, her gaze sweeping over the young faces. "She ensured that your ancestors, Kyle, Dr. Anya, Lyra, Jax, Serafina, yes, even my own great-grandmother, reached this fertile valley. She bestowed upon them this land, this peace, this second chance. Her legacy wasn't merely the ark or the journey. It was the enduring spirit of hope she instilled, the conviction that even from the ashes of devastation, a new world can blossom. Serafina picked up a small, smooth stone from a basket beside her, its surface polished by countless hands. "This," she said, offering it to Finn, "is a memory stone. Each one we carry reminds us of Elara. It reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. It reminds us that leadership isn't about power, but about service. And most importantly, it reminds us that even one brave heart, filled with kindness and unwavering purpose, can change the course of destiny." Finn clutched the stone tightly, feeling its cool weight in his small palm. The other children, inspired, reached for their own memory stones, each a tangible link to a legend as real as the hearthfire's warmth. "We tell her story not just to honor her," Serafina concluded, her voice imbued with profound purpose, "but to remember the lessons she taught us, to be kind, to be brave, to work together, to never lose hope, even when the storms rage. For Elara's spirit, her brave heart, echoes in every sunrise over this valley, in every seed we plant, in every child's laughter. It reminds us that though the old world may have been lost, the new one was forged in the crucible of her selfless love. ensuring that life, in all its beautiful resilience, would always find a way. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow on their faces, the silence filled with the powerful legacy of a girl who became a legend, her story an eternal whisper in the heart of their thriving world.